people say, I'm a back sleeper, I'm a side sleeper. That's not really true. You will typically sleep in almost all of those positions throughout the night. It's just what is the dominant position. And when people say, I am a X sleeper or Y sleeper, you're just talking about what you typically do more often relative to the other positions. More people are side sleepers than front sleepers or back sleepers. About 60% of people are most often side sleeping. Position doesn't matter, with probably two exceptions, although one of them has an asterisk, which is, I don't want to scaremonger. The first is definitive. If you are snoring, if you have sleep apnea or if you know anyone who is snoring and they have not been tested for sleep apnea, go and get them tested. Or if you are, go and get tested. It's real easy to figure out if you're a snorer or not. Download an app. I have no association with them. It's called Snore Lab, Snore Lab, Android, Apple. You open it up, you hit record, you place the phone down by your bedside, it listens to your snoring, and then at the end of the night, you can see the amount of snoring, and it grades it from quiet, moderate, loud, and epic. And you see these Richter shocks throughout the night. The worse still, you can then go and tap at any moment in your night, and you can listen to yourself gasping for breath and snoring. Because snoring, what happens when you snore is that the airway starts to partially collapse. And when it starts to partially collapse, like a straw that gets bent, you start to get these fluctuations, these eddies in the airway. And that's the sound of, that's the partial collapsing of the airway. When the airway collapses completely, the straw goes flat effectively. That's when you stop breathing entirely. And you can be there for 15, 20 seconds and your blood oxygen saturation just starts to plummet. And at some point, your brainstem, which picks up the ratio of the gases in your bloodstream between carbon dioxide and oxygen, says, break glass in case of emergency.
Wake him up.
We've got to wake him up. And that's the moment where you hear, and you gasp and you're back up again. As a consequence, you're never going into deep sleep. You stay in those shallows of sleep. Now, mild sleep apnea, if you have these, what we call apnea events, and apnea is a word, it's beautiful. Pnea is breath, from a Latin derivative. Anything in medicine that has the word a before it is usually the absence of it. Arrhythmia, the absence of a normal rhythmic heart. Apnea is the absence of breath. And mild sleep apnea is you having maybe 5 to 15 of the events per hour. That's how we grade it. For each hour of sleep, how many of these events are you having? Mild sleep apnea, let's just call it 10 events. And you're asleep for 8 hours. Imagine if I were to come in and say, tonight, Chris, I'm going to come into your room, and for the entire night, maybe 80 times throughout the night, I'm going to come in and I'm going to throttle you around your throat to the point where your oxygen saturation drops below 80%. Do you think you're going to feel good by tomorrow morning? The answer is no. But so many people are living with undiagnosed sleep apnea. We think at least 80% of people who have sleep apnea are undiagnosed right now. And that will put you in an early grave.
Is snoring the same as sleep apnea?
No, it's not. You can have snoring and it will not classify as sleep apnea. You still want to understand why you're snoring, but nevertheless, you can just get a very simple home test. In fact, you can look at your risk for sleep apnea already. Go online and type in the search term stop bang questionnaire, stop bang questionnaire. And again, it takes probably 2 minutes to fill out, and it will give you a risk hazard ratio of how likely is it that you have sleep apnea. And it correlates very well with an at-home sleep apnea test. So it's a good, quick proxy. I love Snore Lab, though. That's another great way to frighten yourself into understanding what's exactly happening. So all of which to say, I think I'm forgetting how we got here, but nevertheless,
sleeping positions.
Sleeping position is one of those situations where when you are lying on your back, you are allowing your airway the direct access to this thing called gravity. And when gravity is present with back sleeping, it's far easier to pull that straw flat shut. So that's why we typically don't like people with sleep apnea sleeping on their back. The old school approach, gosh, when I was coming up, sort of start to treat was, or to at least get you away from a back sleeping position, was you would ask the gentleman, usually they're more heavy set, you would ask them, find a t-shirt from your wife, usually smaller, and get that t-shirt that has a pocket on the breast. And then I want you to wear that tight t-shirt back to front. And then I want your wife to take a tennis ball before you sleep and put it in the pocket.
Yeah.
And every time you roll over, it's so uncomfortable that you train yourself out of back sleeping.
Wow.
And so that's the old school.
Is that, so why do we have preferences for sleeping position? Is this chronotype? Is this just habitual? Can we train ourselves out to being
Usually based on your skeletal ergonomics and how you want to sleep. It's also in part driven absent of your body based on your mattress. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, you know, having a mattress that's at least supportive enough where you don't get that banana bowing, because if you are a front sleeper and you're sleeping on a poor mattress, then all of a sudden you just get this every night, this bending of the spinal cord and you're lying there. I mean, just say, okay, today for 8 hours, I'm going to have you compressed into this banana shape lying on your front. And then at the end of that 8 hours, get up and, you know, do 10 jumping jacks and feel great. Not so much. So you've got to be mindful of the position. So I would say sleeping on your back, if you're a snorer, not so great. There is some evidence that sleeping, and I'm going to forget which side it is now. I'm trying to think of my anatomy, but sleeping, I think it's on your left side, based on how your gastrointestinal system is working, leads to a greater degree of GERD, which is gastric reflux. In other words, getting heartburn, just get reflux.
Interesting.
So that's the second one, though, really, that I was going to mention is sleeping on your front or on your back may not necessarily be ideal, because what they found is that during sleep, and this quick tangent, I'll come back to it, but another one of the new functions of sleep is brain cleansing. That when we go into sleep, your brain essentially has this sewage system that kicks into high gear, and it washes away all of the metabolic detritus that's been building up across wakefulness. Because from a biochemical perspective, wakefulness is low-level brain damage. Sleep is your sanitary salvation. And two of the pieces of metabolic detritus that sleep system will cleanse your brain of are beta amyloid and tau protein, which are the two culprits that underlie, we believe, the Alzheimer's disease cascade. And what's interesting is that when you are sleeping on your side, these are animal studies, they found that that cleansing system is more efficient than when you're sleeping on your back or your front. And what they did was they showed this in rats and in mice. And then I was watching this, I was at a conference. They started to show you pictures in the wild of every single animal sleeping. What was common across all of them, no matter how they contorted their body, the common ingredient was that their head was always on one side or the other. As if that was the natural sort of tendency, the predilection of how sleep was optimally designed. And they argue that the reason for that is because that's when you get greatest optimality of flow of this, what we call the glymphatic cleansing system. Now, I would say that I haven't seen strong replication of that, nor have I seen any evidence that that's true in human beings. Human beings are a very odd species. Our head is tilted 90 degrees relative to many others. Think about a giraffe, a donkey, think about a dog, a cat. Their head is lifted up in line with their spinal cord. When we went from being quadrupeds to bipeds, one of the things that had to happen, because we were walking on all fours with our head out like a dog, if you then stood up on your back legs but kept the head in that same position, all you're doing is getting very deep interest in clouds. So our head tilted down 90 degrees. And so that means that our ergonomics of the head and the cranium may be very different to animals. So I think the jury is out, and I don't think that's any good reason for you to start worrying about, oh my goodness, I've got to get my head to the side, and if I'm not, if it's down on the pillow or I'm on my back, don't worry about that.
Is there anything else to say on snoring, people that snore, why we snore, and then sort of progressing through that to treat sleep apnea?
I would simply say that coming back to being insufficiently slept and that mood dysregulation and you not knowing what you, the true self, actually was, is ever more true in untreated sleep apnea patients. And I remember we were doing a study with one group and we started to treat these individuals. Now, there are numerous new treatments out there. If you have mild sleep apnea, you may not need one of these masks, these nasal pillows, which are called CPAP machines, CPAP, and it stands for
continuous positive airway pressure. This little nasal pillow pushes pressured air up your nose, and it acts like an airway splint to keep the airway open so it doesn't collapse. Now, if you have severe sleep apnea, I know that these machines can be invasive, although people like ResMed have really great machines now. The old school kind of mask, fighter pilot, Tom Cruise, those were tough to live with. Now they're much better. Nevertheless, I would say, even if you feel as though you're struggling to sleep because of this kind of pipe that's coming off you, that's still far better than you sleeping without it and having the horrific oxygen desaturation and minimal sleep quality that you get otherwise. So nevertheless, if you have mild sleep apnea, you now have these mandibular augmenting devices. So it looks like a sports gum guard, top and bottom, but it's hinged. And what it tries to do is move the lower jaw forward by just a couple of millimeters. And what's fun is that you can do this test at home, lie on your back and just sort of lie there and start making the snoring noise. So I can make the snoring noise. And then just try to move your jaw forward. It's actually much harder to snore.
Wow.
And it's a tiny change anatomically in the jaw, but it can make a vast difference. So now these new mandibular devices are out there. There's all sorts of new ways. There are also, some people obviously rightly don't wish for this. There are more invasive surgeries where you'll put a neurostimulator that stimulates the airway and forces it open.
Wow.
And that saves you from having the CPAP machine. And some people end up...
Permanent CPAP machine.
Yeah, it's a permanent CPAP machine. So there are lots of great ways to treat it.
What about snoring? What about reducing snoring, something that's presumably more common than sleep apnea?
Yeah. So there I would probably go to a mandibular device. Speak to your dentist. If they don't know about it, go find a dentist who does. They can make up these devices, and most of them are covered by insurance. You can buy them on Amazon. Make sure that you just look at the star ratings and make sure it's rated by at least a couple of 500, 600 people, and then believe the rating. And you've got to get a bit used to it. And, you know, I actually about 3 or 4 years ago, because I would track ruthlessly every night my snore lab, I could start to see a little bit of snoring coming on. Now that's just my age. As we age, you know, just like the rest of your body, it becomes a bit saggy. My muscle tone isn't what it used to be. And so I started to see signs of very mild sleep apnea. Now, I wasn't in anywhere close to the region of needing to be treated, but because I know so much about sleep, I don't want to live a shorter life, nor do I want to live a life with disease. So I just bought myself one of these devices. I ended up then having a great dentist friend who specializes, and we actually got the proper
Custom
device, so the
scanned.
custom device. And yeah, but you can buy them on Amazon. You put them in hot water,
Like a gum
you
guard.
bite down, gum guard, and they're actually not too bad if you can tolerate them. For smaller people who don't have jaws like my jaw and certainly your jaw, you know, it's going to be a bit, you know, tougher. You know, my wife, very slim, refined woman, you know, she's probably not going to be able to tolerate it because the jaw mass is just not sufficient. So you've got to be, I'm not trying to say it's a one size fits all for everyone, but for those who can, if you have some mild snoring, it will clean it right up. It's very impressive.